physiological functions. So we're not sure of all of the reasons that people need to sleep, but generally we agree that sleep helps us preserve and restore energy. It helps our nervous system recuperate from wakeful activity. It helps promote brain plasticity and learning. It helps us consolidate memories. It helps us regulate our emotions. It's also important for immune system functioning. Can you all think of any other reasons that sleep is important? This would be a good place to use the chat box. Or do we cover them all? Jasmine is a chat. Oh, okay. Here we go. Now they're rolling in. Great. Oh yeah. Yes. Dr. Ribbon says, dreaming, Kyle. Dreaming is an important part of sleep. What about that? And so we'll talk about a little bit more about in regulating emotions when we talk about different stages of sleep. Oh, Robert uses sleep to ignore his in-laws after dinner. Sleep can serve other kinds of functional purposes. Okay, yeah, Kobe's talking about how things functions of sleep in terms of taking out the trash. One of the functions of sleep, literally taking out trash in your brain and your body. Kelsey's talking about, yeah, memories too. Okay, awesome. I'm glad to have the chat box working. So, one of the things that's interesting about sleep is that we know more about the functions of sleep from what happened to people when they are not getting enough sleep or when they're getting sleep deprived, other than like really understanding how all these different mechanisms of sleep operate. So, to me, incredibly fascinating. That's something that hopefully we're all doing every day, is serving so many different functions. And when everything is working well, we really don't even understand why it's doing what it's doing for us. So, pretty interesting. So, probably my favorite slide in this whole presentation is this graph right here. And this is a graph of how much sleep people need. So, I'm curious, what have you all heard? And I know we've got some healthcare providers on the call today. What do you tell your patients in terms of how much sleep they should be getting? All right, so Lisa says, I heard 7 to 8 hours, 8 hours, 7 to 9, 7 to 9. So that's probably our most common response. You probably have also heard 8 hours. Thank you, Janet. And an interesting way to think about this question is to think about, if you tell everybody that they need 8 hours of sleep, that's pretty similar to telling people that you need to eat 2,000 calories a day to maintain a healthy weight. Now, that may be true for the general population, but that's not true for everybody. And the same thing goes with sleep. And you can see that in the graph here. So, like Dr. Ribbons is saying, the average range, actually outside of the average, would be about 6 to 10 hours. It's also, this tracks pretty closely to a normal distribution. So you can think about the general population, about 2/3 of the population are going to need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. That there are some people out there that need less sleep than that, and there are some people out there that need more sleep than that to feel well rested. So, Dr. Ribbons, you're all over this. So let's get into the details here. So, how would somebody know that they were getting as much sleep as they needed? How would you know that you were getting enough sleep? So I know Jasmine told me at the very beginning of the class today that she did not get enough sleep last night. Jasmine, how would you know that you were getting enough sleep? Okay.
I would feel well rested when I woke up, not tired, not kind of the brain fog, able to function throughout the day.
Yeah. So, okay. Thanks, Jasmine. So we're getting a variety of responses here. And okay. So yeah. So this is awesome. So, s- so hopefully people wake up feeling rested, but that's not always the case. There are a lot of different factors that can influence how people feel when they first wake up in the morning. Commonly, different medications that people are using, especially ones people are using for sleep, can affect how they feel when they wake up in the morning. There are other physiological factors like your circadian rhythm plays a role in how you feel when you first wake up. Other medical conditions could be playing a role in how you feel when you first wake up. And so, how you feel when you first wake up is not necessarily the best indicator. Now, early on in this response, somebody said, you know, like, I'm not falling asleep during the middle of the day. You're not falling asleep during my presentation. And that may be a little bit of a joke, but it's also a really good answer. So people will know that they're getting as much sleep as they need if they do not feel excessively sleepy during the daytime. So if you're not having to like supplement with caffeine, you're not having to get up and like take a walk to keep yourself from falling asleep, then chances are you're getting as much sleep as you need. And there could be other things that are affecting your fatigue or your kind of your how much energy you have during the daytime. So that's a really important distinction. And I will say, you know, probably one of the more common issues I see when people are having problems with insomnia is that they are on the lower end of sleepability. So maybe they're like a 6 or 7 hour a night sleeper, but they are trying to get 8 or 9 hours of sleep per night. So if you're a 6 or 7 hour a night sleeper and you're trying to sleep 8 or 9 hours, how do you think end up spending the other time that you're giving yourself to sleep? Because you could be asleep or you could be what? This is an easy one, hopefully. Yeah, awake. And if you're awake during the middle of the night, you're probably feeling frustrated. And so as we'll talk a little bit later on. We want to get people on a sleep schedule that's a good fit for their sleep ability. Otherwise, they're probably going to be tossing or turning or being awake during the night, and usually they're frustrated during that time because you don't set aside time during the middle of the night to do other things usually. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how sleep duration changes across the lifespan. This is probably no surprise to folks in our audience, but newborn babies need a lot of sleep, about 14 to 17 hours. And we also know that babies are not getting all of their sleep at nighttime. That's getting spread throughout a 24-hour period. As kids start getting a little bit older, they're starting to consolidate more of their sleep into the nighttime, but they're also getting a lot of, or they're napping still frequently during the daytime. But by the time kids are hitting toddler years, they're getting most of their sleep consolidated at night and usually have a couple naps during the daytime. And by the time they're two, you know, even cutting down to like one nap during the day. And then once they hit preschool years, starting to phase out napping, getting about 10 to 13 hours of sleep. School age kids, 9 to 11 hours. Teenagers, 8 to 10. Though one thing I always call out here is you may say 8 to 10 hours. I know teenagers that can sleep 14 hours, 16 hours. And usually what's going on in those cases are teenagers are getting sleep deprived during the school week, and then they're catching up on some of the sleep that they missed out on the weekends. Now that's not a great pattern to be in, but there are physiological reasons that kids are getting less sleep because of their school set schedules, and also their activities. You know, keep them up late at night. There's just not enough time in the day for many teenagers to get everything done and participate in activities and get enough sleep. But by the time we're hitting our young adult years, we're really kind of settling into how much sleep we're going to need throughout the adult lifespan, around 7 to 9 hours. And then that tails off a little bit in older adults, though that has more to do with older adults' ability to produce sleep versus just not needing as much sleep as they did when they were younger. So let's briefly talk about sleep architecture and how our brain progresses through different stages of sleep. I will go a little bit faster through this than I normally do because for the sake of time today. So generally speaking, sleep is organized into non-REM sleep and REM sleep. So you all have probably heard of REM sleep before, but that stands for rapid eye movement. Non-rapid eye movement sleep has three distinct stages, stages 1, 2, and 3. Stage 1 sleep is the lightest stage of sleep. And you can think about it as like being a bridge between being awake and being asleep. Interesting fact about stage 1 sleep is about half the time people don't even realize that they're in stage 1 sleep. They think that they're awake during that time. Stage 2 sleep is an intermediate stage of sleep where we spend a good chunk of the night, probably around 40% of the time. And then stage 3 sleep or deep sleep is probably where we're getting a lot of our physiological restoration. I know Kofi was mentioning taking, or what I say, taking out the trash. We think one of the functions of deep sleep is to literally clear out things like amyloid plaques in our brain during the night. And lack of deep sleep has been associated with conditions like dementia or Alzheimer's. And then REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, is unique because your eyes are literally moving rapidly during this time. And because our eyes are moving rapidly, that's an indication of something. That means that your brain is active during that time. And specifically, the visual processing part of your brain is very active during REM sleep. And that is when people are doing a lot of their dreaming during the night. Because they are dreaming and their brain is really active, their bodies are also partially paralyzed during this time to keep people from acting out their dreams. Um, and if you think about the functions of REM sleep, Dr. Ribbons was talking about dreaming earlier. We think like the function of dreaming is to give your brain an opportunity to work through different situations going on in your life. So different stressful circumstances, potentially accept things that you do not have control over, potentially generate new solutions to other things. And there's also just a lot about dreaming that we do not understand. And I think that the jury's out on whether or not it's worthwhile to explore the meanings of dreams, or how those things could be helpful for people. And the other thing I'll say about dreaming is, we know that we even have a phrase in our culture. People say, "Why don't you sleep on it tonight?" Whenever you have a big decision or something. And I'm guessing that many of you have had that experience, going to bed thinking about something really stressful, feeling overwhelmed by it, and then you wake up in the morning and it feels less stressful than it was the night before, or maybe you've thought of a new way to deal with the problem. Sometimes people wake up during the middle of the night literally having dreamt of a solution to a problem. So pretty cool that our brains will kind of do this in a subconscious way, and help us accept different things and solve different problems going on in our lives. So the graph that we're looking at here is called a hypnogram. And this explains how our brain progresses through different stages of sleep during the night. If we start out here on the top left side, we've got stage W, that stands for wakefulness. I quickly drop down into stage 1 sleep, drop down into a little bit of stage 2, and then I get my first big chunk of deep sleep at the beginning of the night. Back up to stage 2 and get a little bit of REM sleep. And that first U shape you see is what we would call one sleep cycle. A sleep cycle lasts approximately 60 to 90 minutes, and your brain will continue to progress through different sleep cycles until you wake up in the morning or you're done sleeping. So after I finish this first sleep cycle, I drop back down, get a little bit more stage 2, more stage 3, back up to stage 2. I get some a little bit of REM sleep, and then I wake up for the first time during the night. One question for y'all: how many times do you think is normal for people to wake up during the night? So while this person wakes up, maybe they roll over, they go to the bathroom, and then they hopefully fall back asleep easily. They get a little bit more deep sleep here, and then they spend the rest of the night kind of alternating between getting stage 2 sleep and REM sleep, stage 2 sleep and REM sleep. And then as we get close, kind of in and out of light sleep. Really interesting responses here. So some people are not waking up very much at all. Some people are saying 5 to 7. Um, in general, people are remembering waking up 3 or 4 times a night on average. However, they're usually waking up more frequently than that. They're not even awake long enough to even recognize that they actually woke up during that time. So most of you look like you're on pretty normal amount of times to remember waking up during the night. The people that are on the lower side of waking up, you may be a little bit sleep deprived. You're sleeping really soundly during the time that you have. You may be running at a little bit of a deficit, though it could also be a really good fit for you overall. And those of you that are remembering waking up 5 or 7 times, you may be giving yourself a little bit too much time for sleep, but there could be other factors involved in how many times you're waking up during the night. When people give themselves more time to sleep, their sleep will start to get spread more thinly across the time that they're giving themselves. And in turn, they would find that they are waking up a little bit more frequently. We don't really consider this a problem unless people are having a hard time getting back to sleep or they're spending a lot of time awake during the night. And by a lot, the kind of the clinical cutoff we use is about 30 minutes. So just a note here about how sleep architecture changes over the lifetime. The main thing I like to call out here, this SWS stands for slow wave sleep or stage 3 sleep. And we see that younger people get a significant proportion of time that they're asleep in deep sleep. As they get older, they get progressively less deep sleep. And that drops off even more in the 75 plus crowd. So our body's ability to produce deep sleep declines as we age. And one of the, I don't know if this is sad or not, it's just a physiological reality, is that when we get less deep sleep, that tends to get replaced by stage 1 sleep and then this WASO, which stands for wake after sleep onset. So a really normal part of how sleep changes when we get older is we do not get as much deep sleep and we tend to spend a little bit more time awake during the night and in lighter stages of sleep. This is one of the reasons why it becomes more common for older people to nap or doze during the daytime, just because they can't get as much sleep during the night as they used to be able to. All right, so let's talk a little bit about process C and process S. So these are the main processes that regulate our sleep. So process C refers to our circadian rhythm or our internal biological clock or circadian clock. Process C operates independently from other sleep-related processes and influences things like when you feel the most alert, when you feel sleepy, when you feel hungry. It's regulating your body temperature. It's regulating when your body is secreting different hormones. So it is fascinating that there's this tiny little part of our brain that responds to light that is this timekeeper for so many physiological processes in our body. Now, the other major factor here is called process S. And process S refers to our body's physiological drive for sleep. And one of the most helpful ways to think about process S would be to compare it to something like hunger, in the sense that the longer you go without eating food, the hungrier you would get over time. The longer you go without drinking water, the thirstier you would get over time. And the same thing goes with sleep. Whenever people are getting less sleep than usual, they're building up extra sleepiness, and then they're usually able to sleep better the next day. Or even in a 1 day period, whenever somebody first wakes up in the morning, they start generating sleepiness for the next day. And they generate that sleepiness all up until the time that they go to bed at night. So our little graph down here explains how these processes work together when people are sleeping well. So the blue line represents physiological drive for sleep. This person wakes up at 7 a.m. They're awake all day long, and all during this time that they're awake, they're generating sleepiness. They go to bed at 11 p.m. They burn off all that sleepiness, and then the process repeats itself again the next day. The green line represents your circadian rhythm. And in this slide, this is representing how hard your brain is working to keep you awake. So when you first wake up in the morning, hopefully it's not working very hard at all to keep you awake. It shouldn't have to. As the day progresses, it sends more and more alerting signals to help keep you awake during the daytime. And then there's a steep drop off when people get close to the time that they would normally be going to bed, hopefully in the absence of light. Their brain is secreting more melatonin, and this would be an ideal time for somebody to fall asleep. They fall asleep, and then the process repeats itself again the next day. The other thing I like to point out in this slide is there are a big other factor that can influence process C and process S. And I'm just going to refer to this as arousal. And you can think about arousal coming in the form of physiological arousal or cognitive arousal, which is a fancy way of saying thinking a lot about things. So we need to be able to override process C and process S. If something like you're in physical pain during the night, we need to move our position. You hear your smoke alarm go off during the night and you need to respond to something. You hear a loud noise, a crash during the night. You need to be able to override these processes and to be able to respond to it. And then on the psychological side, When people are stressed or worried about things, then from an evolutionary standpoint, we need the capacity to stay awake, to problem solve, to deal with stressors at hand. The problem with this is this process that makes a lot of sense in terms of helping us survive um, can also get hijacked by modern stressors. And, like you're stressing about, an email that you receive from a coworker, or, what your kids are doing on social media. Those are not problems that you're probably going to be able to solve by thinking about them during the night. But your brain responds in the same way as if it were like trying to figure out where it was going to spend the night, or where it was going to get food the next day, or something like that. So I just like to point out that normal sleep gets interrupted all the time by these different forms of arousal. And when we're trying to help people manage insomnia, we're oftentimes helping them target those different forms of arousal to help them sleep more soundly. I wish I had time to ask questions about this right now, but I don't. So let's talk a little bit about our common sleep disorders. So insomnia is defined as dissatisfaction with sleep quality or quantity, and that's characterized by trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up early in the morning and not being able to get back to sleep. Once again, we use a 30-minute cutoff to define that. The kinds of problems that people are usually running into during the daytime when they're having problems with insomnia are they may feel tired, they may feel sleepy during the daytime, they may feel like their problems with sleep are causing them to feel more down or irritable. They may have trouble with their memory or concentrating, like Jasmine was pointing out earlier. Um, and when people have long-term problems with insomnia, their life kind of starts revolving around it. They start canceling different obligations because they're afraid that they won't be able to sleep well, or they wouldn't have energy to participate or something, and that becomes a big problem. But for people to meet diagnostic criteria for insomnia, they would need to be having this problem at least 3 nights a week, and that be going on for about 3 months. And the most effective long term treatment for insomnia is called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. Oftentimes, people are also using medications to treat insomnia, though usually not the best long term option for most people. And if you want to learn more about insomnia, I highly encourage you to sign up for that insomnia education class I teach. So I can really go in depth talking about what treatment looks like and how people can adapt those strategies to use on their own. All right. I'm going to skip through our common sleep disorders and talk about some things to help people make sleep as good as it can be. Talk to your healthcare providers about sleep apnea and restless leg syndrome. I see Kaylin, one of our sleep providers on the call. Send her your messages about sleep apnea and restless leg syndrome. Okay, so let's talk about things people can do to get the best possible sleep. So earlier we were talking about how much sleep people need on average. If you have a good understanding of how much sleep you need per night on average, then you would probably be well served to follow a sleep schedule that is approximately 30 minutes to an hour more than that. So let's say you're about a 7 hour a night sleeper. You would probably want to be on a sleep schedule that gave you about 7.5 to 8 hours to sleep per night. One of the best things that you can do is set a consistent wake time for yourself. So let's say you need to be up by 6:30 in the morning for work or something to get ready for work. So you set your wake time for 6:30, and you stick to that regardless of how well you slept the night before. And then you try to go to bed around 11 p.m. every night. You push yourself to stay up and be um, so you're extra sleepy when you go to bed, and that usually helps people fall asleep easily and stay asleep, get back to sleep faster during the night. So once again, rule of thumb, if you've got a good feel for your sleep ability, giving yourself an extra 30 minutes to an hour just to accommodate, like probably not going to fall asleep instantly, probably going to have to go to the bathroom during the night, probably going to wake up a few times. And that just gives you a little bit of a buffer there. Sleep hygiene. I feel like everybody knows what good sleep hygiene is these days. This information is everywhere. Um, probably the most important one here, at least when it comes to insomnia, is avoiding trying to fall asleep. Oftentimes, the people that struggle with insomnia the most have the best sleep hygiene. They are doing everything right and they're trying really hard to fall asleep. They're listening to their headspace stories every night. They've got a weighted blanket, they've got blue light blocking glasses. They haven't watched TV in 8 hours and they're still struggling to sleep. And they're struggling because they are trying to fall asleep. Trying to fall asleep really does not work at all. And if I asked all of you to give me your best effort right now, I'm guessing that you wouldn't be able to make yourself fall asleep right now. If you tried to stay awake and keep listening to me, we'd have a better chance of getting you to fall asleep. So we try to avoid trying to fall asleep. We put our attention into other things that are more conducive to falling asleep than trying to sleep. Some other things to point out here, watch out for alcohol in their bedtime. Alcohol can help you feel sleepy, but will interrupt the quality of your sleep later on. Watch out for liquids in the evening if you're going to the bathroom several times during the night. That's actually the most effective treatment strategy for treating middle of awakenings in older adults. We try to help people have a good bedtime routine where they're doing the same kinds of things before they go to bed every night. And another thing to consider is keeping your bedroom cooler than many people would consider. Mid 60s is usually an ideal temperature for people's sleep. Yeah, and thanks, Jasmine. If people do need to hop off, we understand we're recording it. I'll probably be done in about the next 5 to 10 minutes if you can hang out. And then, of course, we also want people to feel comfortable in their beds, and we don't want any light to bother them, and we also want we don't want noises to bother them. Some people like silent, some people like some background noise, fans, sound machines, that kind of stuff. There's no right or wrong there. It's just kind of what you train yourself to get used to. So I think this slide is really important because I have met many people that stay really busy right up until the time they go to bed. And probably some of you on this call today are used to working close up until the time you're going to bed, or you're checking your work email right before you go to bed, or you're watching interesting, stimulating television, or you're reading interesting books. You're doing household chores right up until the time you go to bed. And oftentimes our brains just need more time to slow down and relax before they are ready to go to sleep at night. So I really encourage the patients I work with to give themselves at least 30 minutes, hopefully closer to an hour, to wind down and relax in the evenings before going to bed at night. The kinds of things we typically have people do. Sometimes we have people doing some reading during this time. Once again, as long as it's not too stimulating or like a real page turner, you can probably start feeling sleepy during this time. Sometimes we have people like doing stretching, listening to relaxing music, taking a hot bath or shower. All that kind of stuff can be a good fit. And I'll even have people watch television sometimes during this time. I think that probably the most important factor there again is just how interesting it is. So if you're like watching the news right before you go to bed, that's probably too stimulating. The kinds of things that are helpful, like reruns of sitcoms, or you're like watching reruns of Friends, or you're watching nature documentaries, or just things that are kind of just not too stimulating or interesting. And then the other factor there is you may be saying, I can't believe Kyle said watch television before bed because of blue light. I definitely believe that blue light can affect people's melatonin secretion, can affect their circadian rhythm. But I really think that this gets overstated and people focus more on blue light rather than what they're doing with electronic devices. And so imagine, that you're trying to put out some fires over email before you go to bed at night. Do you think that you're getting more stimulation from the light from your phone or from the problem that you're trying to solve? Or if you're on social media, are you getting more stimulation from the content that you're processing or from the light? The safest bet is to stay away from the light altogether. But I think people sometimes think, well, if I wear my blue light blocking glasses, then I can do whatever I want in my electronics before bed. And they're really missing an important point in that activity just may be too stimulating or interesting. All right, one more slide for y'all, and then I'll stick around to answer questions. So what are things people can do to feel as alert as possible when they wake up in the morning? We try to watch out for snoozing. Snoozing usually doesn't help people feel more well rested. Um, we try to increase activity upon waking, like getting up and taking a walk or doing some chores around the house can help people feel more alert. Taking a shower, washing your face and hands, especially splashing like cold water on yourself, can help you feel more alert. Getting sunlight exposure, like this time of year, getting a walk in the morning is probably one of the best things people can do. Or you can also get light exposure from the kinds of lamps people use for seasonal affective disorder. That can be really helpful in feeling more alert. Also, listening to upbeat music. It's hard to feel as sleepy if you're listening to upbeat music. And then social interaction, talking to friends, loved ones, talking to somebody on the phone. It's once again, it's going to help you be more alert faster if you are interacting with other people, even if you don't necessarily feel like interacting with other people when you first wake up. So I did not ask questions on those individual slides like I normally do, but I want to give you all a chance to ask me questions now. I've got quite a bit of time, so feel free to start firing away, and I'll do my best to answer them. How do I know if I'm tired from too little or too much sleep? Um, so one really important thing to differentiate is, do you feel sleepy or do you feel tired? And oftentimes people use that interchangeably, where somebody like myself thinks about it a little bit different. So let's say tired may just feel like you feel like heavy in your body. You don't feel motivated to do things. And where I would say sleepiness is like you're having a hard time keeping your eyes open. You're having like you may be dozing off during the daytime. Like maybe you're really noticing those cognitive deficits, like word finding, ability to concentrate or things like that would be affected probably more by sleepiness than fatigue itself. And you also bring up an interesting point. People can feel more tired sometimes from sleeping more than they would need. Um, but hopefully, I'm answering your question, that we really want to focus more on sleepiness. And somebody that's really sleepy would just be like looking for a place to like curl up and lay down. Where you're physically tired. Maybe you're like feel more like watching television or something, like your brain is done, but you're not sleepy during that time. Hannah says, I've heard that women need more sleep than men. Is that true? I don't think that that would be all that true. If it did, it would be a tiny difference. I think the one thing that I do know is true is, we were talking about people's deep sleep ability as they get older. That seems to be more pronounced in men than women. So that's one particular instance in older adults, where you would likely see women sleeping more than men at nighttime, because they do not seem to lose as much of their ability to produce deep sleep as men do. And yeah, and then Jamie's saying, what about our like foggy brain? You know, More often than not, some of these kinds of problems are actually caused by the medications people may be using for sleep. Like a big culprit I see is like trazodone, and some of like the other older antidepressants just make people feel really groggy. Antihistamines can make people feel that way too, and so it's kind of sad that people turn to these medications to sleep better, to feel better, but they end up having the side effect of causing them to feel worse than they did getting poor sleep in the first place. Once again, I don't know the details of your situation, but there are other factors that can certainly affect how you're feeling other than just lack of sleep. Lori, does supplemental melatonin decrease your body's ability to make its own melatonin? I don't think it does. But if you're using melatonin, you should ask yourself, why are you using melatonin? Do you feel like your body is not producing enough melatonin to help you sleep? Chances are that the mechanism that would cause you to produce melatonin is working just fine, and you may be looking for a solution that you don't need. Um, what would you suggest to do if you're still not asleep after an hour? Sabine, and this is kind of goes more into my insomnia education class, but generally, what we say is you're not doing yourself any good, just laying there tossing and turning. I tell people that if they just feel wide awake or if they've been awake in bed for more than about 20, 15, 20, 30 minutes, they're usually better off putting their attention into something more conducive to falling asleep. And so the kinds of things I'll have people do, usually like getting up and reading something not too interesting, or once again, maybe like putting on a television program that they're not too interested in watching. Light is a consideration there, depending on if it's right up in your face or farther away, the size of your television, all that kind of stuff. Um, but the main idea, put your attention into something more conducive to falling asleep. And the way I think about it is we want to give your brain a choice between going back to sleep or doing something boring or relaxing. Most of the time, people are laying there worrying about things, planning things, and that interferes with their ability to fall asleep. So if they can put their energy into something like reading something boring, oftentimes they'll start feeling sleepy while they're doing that, and we can help them train their brain not to be worrying or planning things during the night. One of my favorite people come up with all sorts of interesting things to read for this purpose. Like one of my favorites was a History of Idaho geology book. I had somebody reading the fictional romance of George and Martha Washington. So lots of examples out there. But the main idea, putting your attention into something less interesting than what you would normally read, usually helps people start feeling sleepy. Kate says, I sleep more in the winter and less in the summer. Is that normal? You're probably reacting to how much light is in your environment. And, when we've got such long days in the summer in Idaho and short days in the winter, that your circadian rhythm is playing a role. I think it is fairly normal for people's sleep to fluctuate like that. Some seasonal variation. We all kind of hibernate a little bit, it seems like. Um, yeah, but once again, light is probably playing the biggest factor in that. And you could manipulate it if you wanted to, but if it's not causing you any problems, I wouldn't worry about it. Robin, it's not problem is not falling asleep, but getting back to sleep during the night. Yeah, so Robin, I would say the same or advice that we were giving to Sabine, in terms of putting your energy into something less interesting. It shouldn't take an hour and a half to fall back asleep. So the combination of tightening up your sleep schedule, and being on a sleep schedule that's a good fit for your sleep ability, and putting your attention into something more conducive to falling asleep is probably the combination of strategies that are going to help you get back to sleep faster. But would also encourage you to sign up for that insomnia education class, so I can tell you more about that. Ooh, Annabeth says, how much sleep should you be getting with the light and deep sleep? I think one of the problems that people run into is, we've got fitness, so many people have fitness trackers these days, and you get all this data, but we don't necessarily know what it means. When it comes to deep sleep, I think the total percentage of time that people spend in deep sleep is like 10 or 15% of the night. And sometimes it really stresses people out because they imagine that they should be getting more deep sleep than that. But there's probably just not, for adults, that's just probably not realistic. Yeah, so there's all those different stages of sleep. So I don't have the breakdown of REM versus stage one versus stage two versus stage three. I think we spend about 40% of the night in stage two. REM is probably 20, 30 ish. Yeah. Okay, Jolene says, is it normal to get a second wind late at night with burst of energy and sleepiness goes away? Sometimes night owls feel that way. If not, I would say sometimes this is like a conditioned response. When people, especially that have been having a really hard time with sleep, um, kind of start to anticipate that they are going to have a poor night of sleep again, and they will experience this. So like the classic example is somebody who's like falling asleep on the couch watching TV and they say, all right, now's a good time to go to bed. I'm finally feeling sleepy. And then you get in bed and you're wide awake again. That is speaking to what we call conditioned arousal, which is a learned association between being awake and being in bed. If this is more like, no, I just get it like around 8 o'clock at night, I get a second wind, or 10 o'clock at night, I get a second wind. It could have more to do with your circadian rhythm. I wouldn't say that it's like normal for people to get that, but it's definitely something that we can work with to manage and get into a more predictable pattern of sleep again. Oh, Ashley, yeah, this is sad. What if waking up at the same time is not an option, like shift work? Yeah, that mostly requires day shifts. Sometimes you have to work nights. Um, That's really, really hard on people. It's really hard when you have to switch back and forth between days and nights. And I know we have so many employees that do that in our healthcare system. It is definitely better if people can stay on one schedule or the other, because I mean, basically, what happens is you're always fighting jet lag. Your circadian rhythm is always trying to catch up with you to where you're at, and your circadian rhythm can adjust, but not that fast. I think it's around an hour-ish a day that your circadian rhythm can catch up. And so when you're flipping your sleep schedule around 12 hours, you just can't catch up. So the best advice I can give is try to stick to as consistent of schedule as possible. And I know that that's probably what everybody tries to do already. Jamie says, can magnesium at night give brain fog side effects like sleep meds do? Good question. I don't know a whole lot about these different kinds of supplements. I know a lot of people do use that. Um, I can't say that I've seen it be super helpful. But if it had been super helpful, they probably wouldn't have come to me to meet with me in the first place. Um, and Rex says, I sleep more on the weekends. Is that okay? I think that probably just comes down to if you're having, sometimes people end up in the pattern where they sleep poorly during the week and then they catch up on sleep on the weekends. If you're finding that you have a particularly hard time sleeping, like Sunday night, Monday night, then you may consider cutting back on sleeping in on the weekends, so that you can spread your sleepiness around to all the other days and get more consistent sleep. But if you do not find that you have trouble on those other nights, then I wouldn't call it a problem. All right. Any other questions here? I'm going to ask you another question. What's one thing that you learned about your sleep that you didn't know or you got reminded of during the class today? Yeah, I can put a link up to it actually. Hold on, and I'll put that in the chat box. Okay, Linda. Yeah, keeping a sleep schedule. Jamie's giving up her snooze. Yeah, you learned this was the first step, guy. Yeah, maybe you need to be in the insomnia education class. Yeah, Hannah, yeah, you had some sleep debt. So, I'm picking on Jasmine a lot today. But Jasmine, you probably have a better night coming to you if you slept poorly the night before. And that can be like one of the silver linings in having poor sleep and trusting that you're gonna sleep better on the next day. Because it kind of takes some of the pressure and stress around getting to sleep off of you, and if you trust in that, then that ends up, yeah, it's hard to look forward to sleep or to appreciate sleeping poorly. So at least we have like one little silver lining in that. Monique, I'm not surprised. You're like an overachiever type, and so I'm not surprised that you were probably very good at sleeping and trying to sleep. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people are kind of taking that to heart or this avoiding trying to fall asleep. I mean, like some interesting research, like if you ask good sleepers what they do to fall asleep at night, what do you think they say? And this is probably like the person sleeping next to you in bed would say the same thing. What do you think good sleepers say they do to fall asleep at night? Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, they don't do anything. Sleep just happens. And, it's like tough to wrap your head around that when you're struggling with sleep. But that's truly, what people will say is like, I don't know, I just laid down and I fell asleep. They're not trying to sleep. They're not worried about their sleep. They're just letting it happen. And it's tough to coach somebody into just letting it happen. And, like when we do cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, we basically try to put people in a situation like where they are just letting sleep happen, and we make them extra sleepy, and then that becomes easier when they're a little sleep deprived. Ader says, do you suggest getting up if you wake up before your alarm, or is it okay to lay in bed until your alarm goes off? It really depends on like what's going through your mind during that time. If you are like worried about things or you feel anxious, frustrated, that kind of stuff, probably better to get up sooner rather than later. If you're just laying there feeling relaxed, and you're not having problems with sleep at other times, then it's probably okay to hang out there for a little bit longer. Um, and I slept like a husband last night. That is funny. Um, okay, Natalie, who does CBT for insomnia? Well, I do CBT for insomnia, though, like I said earlier, I do that in private practice now. I know the lifestyle medicine clinic is working on having some other people get trained to do that treatment approach. Also, some of the therapists in Twin Falls are familiar with that. Um, yeah, so within St. Luke's, lifestyle medicine is working on it, and some of the therapists in Twin Falls do that. If you wanted to see somebody soon, I'm probably the your guy, which is also why I went into private practice so I could help people when they wanted help. All right. Any other questions? Thanks, Lisa. Kaylin, what did you learn in the presentation today? That's important. Yeah.
Caitlin, you won't be able to unmute. Everybody's muted on this call.
So she's actually a sleep provider in the sleep clinic, so she would probably have some important things to say. We probably can't do that in the mean, unless you can change her permission setting, Jasmine.
Let me see. Okay.
You didn't want to
She
talk.
should go now. She can go now.
Yeah, now you can unmute yourself, Kaylin.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. I thought it was very informative, and it was great for me to kind of just reinforce, okay, what I'm saying is accurate to patients. But I thought it was spot on, and I've missed having you around. I was just sending you an email. I've been struggling lately trying to get patients in, but it sounds like I can still send them to the class and they can just pay $10 out of pocket. Is that true?
Yeah. So that's how that insomnia education class works. So yeah, that's a great option for people. I love teaching that, to essentially prevent people from needing individual therapy appointments.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a great start for most of them. And it's, it works for a lot of them because it's a pretty easy, kind of fix for what they're doing and what they're not doing. So that's awesome. I thought it was great.
All right. Well, thanks, Kaylin. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
That's okay. It was great. Yeah. Thanks.
If anybody's still out there, what percentage of people do you think have problems with insomnia in the adult population?
I say 40%, but I don't know.
You're probably a little biased, Kaylin.
True. I feel like I was going to say 75, but then I'm like, well, it may be a little bit high.
Yeah, everybody you meet with does. Oh yeah, actually these are great responses here. Yeah, people are saying, Laura and Melissa both said 25, 30%. I think that's probably like right on these days. Though oftentimes when I teach that insomnia class, people will say like 75, 80%. And it's usually when I have a little bit of an older crowd in that class, because you do see higher prevalence of insomnia in older people. And yeah, Kofi, yeah, regional geographical differences too. It's problems with insomnia are kind of a luxury of sort. Not that we would really consider insomnia luxury, but it's something that happens like when people don't have other things that they're dealing with sometimes. Right. Well, it's almost 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and call it. Y'all can find me in St. Luke's email if you have any questions for me. Also, I put the link to my website up there if you wanted to meet with me individually. But also want to point out St. Luke's is working on other resources for managing insomnia outside of that are outside of working with me.